Hello, welcome to One-on-One. I'm Jewel Robinson Shepard, and my guest today is General Daniel James, known to his friends as Chappie. General James is the first and only black four-star general in the history of the U.S. military. He needs no further introduction. Welcome, General.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
General, after 35 years of service in the Air Force, you are retiring on the 26th of January, I believe.
That's right.
Some 4 months earlier than you had planned to retire. Unfortunately, there seems to be a small cloud of controversy that hovers over the issue of your retirement as a result of a column that was written by Evans and Novak in the Washington Post. And I want to read something to you. They say that the reason that you are leaving the Air Force now rather than in May as expected is because you have been relieved of your command, where you were commander of NORAD, which is the U.S. Canadian North American Defense Command, and of ADCOM, the U.S. Aerospace Defense Command, because of criticism of the Chief of Staff of Air Force's decision to eliminate ADCOM, and that you wrote a letter to General David Jones criticizing that, and so you have been transferred to the Pentagon. The Air Force, immediately after that article, said that medical reasons were the reasons for your retirement. And I do know personally that you had a mild coronary in September. So what I'd like to do is try to understand, if we can, exactly what the truth is.
Well, I should just answer that question by saying hogwash, because that's precisely what it is. And any time a column appearing under the name of 2 or 3 media representatives puts a cloud of controversy over a man who served not only well, but outstandingly, as my record will show, is just hogwash. The Chief and I still share the same mutual high respect for each other that we always have. And there's absolutely no truth to the article except that I'm retiring, and that I'm retiring early. I'm retiring because I had a heart attack. I was a major commander on flying status. A major commander of a flying command should be on flying status. After you have a coronary, you're automatically grounded. I chose to leave. I have never been fired from a job in my life, and the same holds true today. I am going out of the Air Force with the high respect, not only of my friends in the Air Force, but of every enemy I've ever faced in the sky, because I did it all well. And there is absolutely no truth, and it is very unfair, and this is the thing that bothers me about it, Jewel, for this to continue to come up. How many times do we have to say that this isn't true? Both the Chief and myself. I would have no reason to protect him or vice versa if there were any truth in that allegation. One of the writers called me before he published the article and asked me if it was true. And I said no, and the Chief had told him no in the beginning. The Chief of Staff flew out to officiate at the change of command ceremony. And he did that personally in some of the worst weather he's ever flown in. And he also allowed me to name my successor, General Jim Hill, one of the things that he hadn't done on many occasions. And in his farewell message on me, he said that someone took it upon themselves to try to make Chappie James controversial and a sort of a rebel. He said, well, Chappie James has been controversial all his life, so what the heck's new? But he has always been a man that would say it like it was, and he said words to the fact that that's why I hired him, because I knew that he'd tell me the way it was rather than telling me what he thought I wanted to hear. What I wrote in that letter, I had said to the Chief many times over the past few months, and he knew.
You do have some very strong feelings, of course, about the elimination of ADCOM.
It wasn't the elimination of the command, it was a reorganization. But there is no plan to eliminate the air defenses of the United States of America. And that's another misstatement by people. It has been a reorganization that would put them under different commands and put different resources under different commands and consolidate headquarters. We have to do this because of the budget restrictions that have been placed upon us. So the chief is faced with a very difficult job of trying to preserve the ability to affect the security of this country and still try to do it with as few people and resources as he possibly can. And that's what he was doing in this case. The only shame in this, though, really, that bothers me is that a major commander cannot write a letter to his chief of staff without it ending up in the hands of a newsman almost before the chief of staff gets it, and then to the media, that I would say shame on you for continuing to preserve what has become proven as an untruth in the first place. And it continues to be repeated. It's like the story of the unfaithful housewife to me, that after somebody has spread the rumor that she has been untrue to her husband, if she proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that it wasn't true, the gossips in the street will continue to want to tell the other story because it makes more interesting hearing. And so they continue to slander her name. The chief, it is most unfair to him because from the time I became ill, and unfortunately my wife became ill about the same time.
Yes, I know that.
Nothing has been heaped upon him but suspicion that he was trying to railroad me, as one paper said, out of the Air Force. Nothing could be farther than the truth. Nobody has been fairer than David Jones, and he's one of the finest chiefs of the Air Force that we've ever had. He gave me the job. I asked to go home early because I was no longer physically capable of carrying out the awesome responsibilities of that job. A 4-month difference, and I named my successor, and he's carrying on in the same tradition that other chiefs of NORAD had.
General, you're a warrior. In 1967, you visited President Johnson and asked him not to halt the bombing of North Vietnam, the bombing raids of North Vietnam. Yet you do say on many occasions how much you desire peace. I'm curious because many people say that surgeons are trained to operate on patients, and if they don't practice surgery, of course, they don't get to practice their profession, and that therefore warriors need war in order to practice their professions. How do you react to that kind of thought, that kind of statement?
First of all, I don't know very much about surgery, but I do know warfare, and I am a warrior. Now we're getting into truisms and facts. I was in the midst of a war at that time, and you don't prosecute a war by backing away from the target. I was speaking as a military man. If it's still a matter for diplomacy and negotiation, you stay in the negotiating role. But I firmly believed at that time, and I believe yet, that once you turn it over to the military, then you get the heck out of the way and let the military prosecute the war. That is, if you want to win it. And you shouldn't get into it if you don't want to win it. And that was my feeling at the time. That's my feeling now. The North Vietnamese never chose to come to the peace table at all until we started bombing North Vietnam. And that's what a lot of people forget. We forget very easily. And it wasn't us that went back on the terms of the agreement that were worked out and the protocols that were worked out by Mr. Kissinger and his team with the North Vietnamese. It was the North Vietnamese. Part of the protocols were that they would not try to attack South Vietnam. They overran the country with a complete disregard for their promises. We kept our promise, and we finally moved out as we said we would. It was not us who broke our word. And I believe that if we had pressed the attack early in the war and put on the kind of pressure that our military machine is capable of doing, there never would have been the sad ending to Vietnam that came with the people who spoke with forked tongues, the North Vietnamese.
In view of all of that, how do you feel now about détente, about the junking of the B-1 bomber, for example, about our apparent de-escalation of military priorities in this country?
You're talking about several different things, one of which is the ballpark in the ballpark of the State Department, and not in the military. Again, speaking strictly from a military point of view, the three main pillars in any fabric of lasting peace happen to be strength, partnership, and the willingness to negotiate. And that includes all of us in the government, both the military and the diplomats. And without that first pillar, the pillar of strength, the other two crumble in the dust, because nobody wants to be partners with a weakling. And we cannot bargain effectively in the halls of international diplomacy from a position of weakness. And so we can't say that we will never fight again, no matter what the cost. We will say that we don't want to study war no more, but don't tread on us, as our predecessors said, the forefathers of our country, who said that we shall remain free and independent. Now, when you're talking about detente or any of the other words you want to use, the goal and the prospect that you're looking for is a lasting and a quality peace. We are not here as military men to fight the wars. Really, our ultimate objective is to keep the peace, to have the kind of strength that nobody would dare attack us, and with the kind of warning that our Air Defense Command and NORAD can afford. Anybody in his right mind would be crazy to try to attack us, because we can retaliate in such a way that would levy a price on him that would make it a very poor decision. And this is the stature that we have to maintain. Now, there are people who come out with the very many solutions of guns versus butter, and we can take all that money we've got in defense and put it into welfare. When you're running around shouting freedom now and peace now, you got to have a place to be free and peaceful in. Well, this is ours right here in the United States of America. And in no place as valuable as this are you going to be able to maintain that peace and freedom if you don't have the strength that must protect it if all else fails. Certainly, we'll sit down and we will diploom with anybody with our diplomats that cares to engage in negotiations. However, they must remember that if all else fails, we will maintain the sovereignty of the skies over this country and the peace and the security of our entire country, no matter what the cost. And as long as everybody understands that, then they know that you have to put a price tag on it. And who's going to pay for it? The American people through their gross national product. And it isn't a question of either or. We can have the social programs that we must have. We can sure also have the strength that we must have in our military forces, because our gross national product affords the means for us to have both. It's up to our Chief of Staff, the President, our Commander-in-Chief, the President of the United States, and the Congress of the United States to work out the ways in which we will distribute the wealth of this country so that we can have both the strength to protect it and the means to preserve the affluency of all of the people therein and the rights thereof.
I want to turn to your personal career. You've had a very illustrious military career. 101 missions over Korea, 78 missions over North Vietnam, successful negotiations of withdrawal of troops from Libya, which the State Department termed a very ticklish diplomatic situation that you were very helpful in negotiating. You helped to successfully defend an unpopular Vietnamese war when you were the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense, I believe, for Public Affairs. You paid your dues. You have been cited, for example, and I want to quote to you, as being the only U.S. military officer with emergency authority to deploy nuclear weapons without presidential approval, and as such, one of the most powerful men of any color in and out of the military. You've paid your dues and you've earned your stars, but there's still a lot of people, mostly white, who say that you're a token, who say that you were promoted because you're black. How do you react to that?
First of all, I'd like to dispute your premise. The people who have said that I have heard say that have been mostly black. And they're non-achievers who try to find something other than the ability to say why another black achieves. And want to say that it's because of your color, when they don't go back and recount the record that you just recounted. And I want young black people. They're doing a lot of harm to the young black on the hot sidewalks of a ghetto who wants to find a way out of there without going through the jailhouse door. And I think that the most important role I play, and people like me in all fields, is to provide a role model for them, other than that of Superfly or some other undesirable character that might lead them to that jail door. and that would show to them the kind of way that through service to their country and through opportunities that are present now that were not present when I was coming up on Alkanee Street, that they can escape the ghetto and they can perform a valuable service to their country and they can be remembered for their good works and they will be rewarded. And not get so busy practicing your right to dissent that you forget your responsibility to contribute. And you prosper in proportion as you contribute to this great nation here. And don't let anybody tell you to abdicate your citizenship in this country, to go anywhere else looking for equality and a better life. This is ours right here, just like it is anybody else's. And I deplore any black lad who says he's going to any foreign shore to try to find freedom and opportunity. It's right here in this country. And you can excel now. The doors are flinging open. But you can't stand there banging on those doors of opportunity, yelling, let me in, let me in, let me in, and all of a sudden somebody yanks the door open and you say, wait a minute, I got to go get my bags.
I'm curious about something, Chappie.
Yeah.
A lot of people call you an Uncle Tom. One of the reasons perhaps is because you've made statements that have been controversial. When you spoke to the American Legion, you said, General James told the Legion he was against militant stands by blacks and that he felt every opportunity was open to Negro Americans. When you talked about Stokely Carmichael, you said Stokely is a big mouth who's making a profession out of being a Negro. This black power garbage is for the birds. You were the first black speaker to speak at the DAR Continental Congress, which was the same DAR that denied Marian Anderson the right to sing in 1939. Yet you are also the pilot who participated in sit-ins with the Tuskegee Airmen, integrating a white-only officers club in 1945. And those things don't seem to fit together. They look like an apparent conflict.
Because many of them are misstatements and many of them are things that are taken out of context. I didn't say that Stokely was a big mouth and that he shouldn't make a profession of being a Negro. I said that no one should make a profession of being black. There were too many other things to do. And don't paint yourself into a black corner. Black power standing alone, I said, would turn to garbage. That you must have black ability. And what Jesse Jackson is preaching to young people in the schools today about the power of excellence, that came from my mother, and I can show you speeches that I made 15 years ago where I was preaching to young people about the power of excellence. And that's when I told them this business about don't get so busy practicing your right to dissent that you forget your responsibility to contribute. Those things have been quoted much less than the misquotes that you just read. What I said to all of those people was what I'm saying to you right now. If you say that black is beautiful, I would prefer to hear it black is beautiful also. If you say black is beautiful to imply that some other color is not, then I think that you are implying something that may be as racist as the time when other people said that black was ugly and tried to treat it as such. I'm trying to stamp out hatred throughout the world. And there has been, and most of the misquotes have come from black people, on my words, people who wanted to disbelieve, people who wanted to keep the angry revolution and the burning and the pillaging of our own neighborhoods going on. Of every riot that I ever saw during my time, the people who suffered most were black people.
That's true.
And I wanted to, by gosh, find another way to bring out our frustrations, to solve the inequality that was sparking these things. Of course the black people were provoked a lot of times to, this is the only way, man, and if I can't do something about it any other way, then I'll just might as well destroy it. I can see the frustration involved in that. But I was trying to give them another way out. And this is when people get attacked, when you come up for anything else. That was back then. Now, right. When Jesse Jackson goes out around the schools and is saying the same thing to young people that I was saying then, and incidentally, Jesse heard me say it long before he started using it. We were together where we were both being honored in Chicago, where I made the very speech about the power of excellence. But I don't say this bitterly. I say this hurrah, because Jesse has more of a platform now and more of a favorable platform among young people. First of all, because he's closer to their age, and first of all, and second of all, because he hasn't been painted with the brush of racism or Uncle Tomism reverse, as you say that I have been called. I consider the source, the people who said that. 5 presidents of the United States that I have been associated with have never said that. Roy Wilkins has never said that. Whitney Young has never said that. Vernon Jordan, who will be here to my retirement on the 26th, has never said that. Ben Hooks has never said that. Martin Luther King, a personal friend of mine, has never said that. Coretta King has never said that. So I stand indicted by people who are non-performers themselves, and those kind of indictments I shrug off like I did an enemy's bullets. They don't make any difference.
Tell us about the Tuskegee sit-in.
The Tuskegee sit-in was a time when I was very young, and we at that time, like some of the people who in their minds figured that the only way to solve the frustrations and the hatreds that were being directed toward them at that time in the ghetto, figured the only way to do it was to burn it down. We figured that the only way to stop the inequities that existed in the armed forces in that day were to stage a sit-down or sit-in of our own. We started with the most visible thing, the Officers Club. And it escalated up to a point where they found it necessary to put a sizable number of us into jail.
Accused you of treason, didn't they?
They said mutiny or something of that sort. And then the then defense counsel for the NAACP, Thurgood Marshall, who is now a Supreme Court Justice, went with Bill Coleman, who is just the past Secretary of Transportation. Bill Coleman prepared the brief that finally resulted in getting us free, and with the help of Thurgood Marshall defended our case, and we were all released. But at that time we had said we cannot see any reason why we should go and fight the wars and be robbed of our human dignity here at home before and after we go. And we had said, as Truman had said at the time, the buck stops here. And as it turned out, it was Harry Truman, another Southerner, who had the guts to say, the buck really does stop here. And he said, there will be no more. And you know, he put out a special presidential order saying there will be no more segregated facilities in the armed forces. Well, heck, there was already a law that said that. So what he was telling the racists at that time, obey the law.
Right.
That's all he was saying, obey the law. And so people started reluctantly obeying the law. Reluctantly at first, because I say now that there is no institutionalized racism in the armed forces. And I've been taken to task by some people who are not in the armed forces and don't know what they're talking about, that there is. There absolutely is not. The armed forces are right now on a very positive campaign to try to attract the finest young people they possibly can of all colors. And they have a special minority recruiting program that is trying to attract young people into our highest institutions of learning, of which our Air Force Academy is the highest. I've just recommended a bright young black lady from my hometown down in Fort Walton Beach, Florida, near Pensacola. And we have right now where we used to have, you had to look real close to see a black one when the march on in the Army-Navy game. Now you look and it looks like a checkerboard because we have reached out and got these young people
Then
and brought them in.
The charges that minority recruitment is being downgraded is not true. That's not true?
That's ridiculous. We will not go to a quota system because it would be just as bad to say we will have a quota of 20 blacks per unit. And this unit is going out doing its recruiting. And the 21st one happens to be a young Charlie Taylor that comes trotting up the best of physical condition. And you say, I can't recruit you, man, because I got my 20 blacks for this month. Bring me that skinny white boy. And we don't want a quota. We want to say that we want fighting men for the United States Armed Forces, Americans, no matter what their creed or color or racial or ethnic origin. You come to us with a desire and the qualifications to enter, and we'll take you up until the time we have the full requirements for that particular service for that particular time. And I don't want to see quotas, but I want to see equality in going out attracting all kinds of young people, men and women, to come to the United States Armed Forces.
You know, Chappie, I was a dependent of an Air Force captain in Misawa, Japan, and I met a lot of Air Force pilots, fighter pilots. They're a special breed of cat.
That's for sure.
What makes a man decide to be a fighter pilot?
Well, first of all, I think, contrary to popular opinion, fighter pilots are made, not born. First of all, they get in the service and they become acquainted with young people who can do it by themselves. They can take the responsibility of steering a multi-million-dollar airplane to a target, and no matter what the defenses he finds there, to have enough faith in his cause and his country and his own ability that he will hurl himself at the target and he doesn't even think about turning back. And he has the kind of pride that grows only from having a firm belief in what he's fighting for, and a firm belief in citizenship and patriotism, and no kind of words or stones that can be hurled at him can change him. And that's what a fighter pilot is, and that's what very proudly I am.
I understand that your mother, who taught you as a child, said that she didn't have much use for first Negroes and only Negroes.
Well, she said accurately, there's two Negroes we can do without, that first one and that only one. She said, the first one to do this and the only one to do that. She said, I'm looking forward to the day when so many black people will be doing so many things that are noteworthy that it will no longer be newsworthy. Well, in the military, we have fast approached and have just about reached that plateau that she was talking about.
As I
Although
understand,
I'm still the only four-star black, and when I leave on the 26th, there might be a gap of time, but it's just a matter of time before some more blacks and some more women will be putting on stars. And that day will hasten as young people stop believing the myths of Chappie James being an Uncle Tom or somebody throwing him out
Chappie James,
because of
super
something.
nigger?
And that's more super person, because I compete not only with black folks but with white folks or anybody else, and I win.
What next, Chappie?
I'm going out into the civilian sector to try to continue to serve my country in any way I can, because I still think I have a debt of gratitude to the people who prepared me to do this. My school, for instance, I'm going to head up the fundraising drive for Tuskegee Institute, their centennial drive that will end in 1986. And that will be, they started out, wait, what, 1881, so it will be 1981 when the end of that drive comes off. And I think we've got about 42 million we're shooting for. And so they helped to prepare me. I'm going to help them to get well.
General, we've run out of time. This has been a very special interview, and I'm very grateful for it. Martin Luther King said he was an admirer of yours because he judged men by their own principles and not his own. By your principles, Chappie, and by your own admission, you have earned it because you were damn good. Thank you, and thank you for joining us. See us next week on One on One.
Thank you.